Residents of Norfolk Island are warning they may lose their unique culture if self-rule isn't returned to them by Australia. It's now been 6 years since their government was abolished by Canberra due to financial troubles, and this week a public inquiry began into the recent suspension of the island's regional council. Residents have written to the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, requesting autonomy as appeals continue for the United Nations and Human Rights Council to intervene. Canberra stands by its work in the external territory, pointing to a wide range of economic and infrastructure benefits. SBS reporter Omar Dehen travelled to Norfolk Island to investigate.
This is a showcase of what's been described as the soul of Norfolk Island. Its culture. The language centuries old and tied to a colourful history. But according to some on the tiny island, this unique identity is being eroded.
If I had to put a percentage on it, I would say 90% of our identity is gone. Dane here is the first outsider.
Leah Honeywood's Norfolk lineage goes back 7 generations. Her ancestors, the Pitcairn Islanders, descendants of the infamous mutiny on the Bounty, who became the first permanent settlers in the mid-1800s.
They worked so hard and for so long to become a people and a race, and in 5 years, somebody has come in and obliterated that. What's changed is the Australian government has come in here and put in and imposed their governments and their model rules and things like that that just doesn't apply to Norfolk.
Britain transferred Norfolk Island to Australia just prior to World War I. In 1979, the external territory was granted limited self-rule. But in the wake of the GFC, a financially crippled Norfolk surrendered its self-government status for a bailout. Canberra ultimately abolished the Legislative Assembly, appointing its own administrator. Health and education services are currently managed by New South Wales in return for federal government funding, while Norfolk's 1,000 registered voters have been added to an electorate in the ACT.
We have no say in anything that's being decided for us. Now, everything is decided for us by expat workers and the departmental staff based in Canberra.
When?
Before Australia stepped in, a non-binding referendum saw 2/3 of islanders vote to keep self-rule. And years on, daily defiance persists. A tent embassy, now a permanent fixture outside the old government building, while this field of hands sits in the centre of town. Both symbolic demands for self-determination.
It is my family. It is my ancestors. They built and paid for this place since 1856. And I want to see that continue. Some sort of right to self-determination, some sort of democracy.
We only wanted a helping hand.
Locals angered further after Norfolk's regional council, their last local authority, was suspended in January due to concerns about financial management. Questions over council's viability are the centre of a public inquiry which began on Norfolk Island this week. But disillusioned islanders claim it's another example of democratic rights being denied.
It's definitely gone too far. We have now no voice. We have no elected representation.
Land taxes, which for centuries never existed on Norfolk, is one of the key grievances about Australian rule.
Norfolk's always been acid rich, money poor. They fear that they will lose their land because they can't afford to pay the rates.
Some, though, say life here is better thanks to Australia. Cherise Clark has lived on Norfolk for 40 years.
I can't imagine how the island would have coped without being integrated into the tax system during COVID. So we now have a safety net for people.
Administrator Eric Hutchinson admits the transition could have been better managed, but says the decision was justified.
I'm the last person in the world that wants to see those intrinsic things that make Norfolk Island different to other parts of Australia change if we don't have to change. But equally, there are things that this community, and I know for a fact, appreciate.
The federal minister who represents Norfolk Island reaffirming that to SBS this week. The transition has given residents access to Medicare and the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, the age pension, child support, infrastructure investment and a wide range of other benefits. Residents have a strong representation in federal parliament, while electoral laws determine the population to be too small to have its own electorate.
But for every person who points to reasons why Australian governance is working here on Norfolk Island, there are others who will dispute it, making it a deeply divisive issue in this otherwise tight-knit community. And those who are staunchly opposed to the status quo say momentum for change is growing.
I can't say anything against Australia at all. We love Australia. But they've got to respect us as well. We now going to give up.
In the language of their ancestors, this community has vowed to never give up. On Norfolk Island, Omar Dehen, SBS World News.